So again, welcome. The topic this afternoon for the next hour is a patient safety imperative on electronic medication management. And once again, I was assigned this topic months ago, way before COVID-19 happened. And so I decided once again to take the opportunity to do a disclaimer and also say that I have no disclosure of conflicts of interest. But then I also decided, you know what, we need to change the presentation objectives. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time on how adopting medication management systems in crisis management can impact the team's output and performance, and have some science related to that. But then I'm going to spend a large amount of the next hour just talking about reality-based leadership tools that have helped me during this most unusual time. Again, I just want to have a conversation with you. And I'm going to warn you right now, it's going to get emotional. Maybe not for you, but for me. It's been a really, really difficult year. And one of the things this morning, I may have been rushing through one, it was a legal topic and a new graduate from a law school. I really put some pressure on myself, but there was probably way too much coffee there. It's because I want to tell you what happened this morning about 2:30. I got up to go to the bathroom, and Miss Rita May, who believes dogs are people too, was laying between my bed and the bathroom in the dark. I did not know. I tripped over her, got her all upset, got me all upset. I couldn't go back to sleep because I was worried about this conference today. So I have to remember that dogs are people too, and she was wonderful, and she calms me down. I just wanted to share that story with you as we go forward. I'm going to share a lot of different stories as we go through this today. So going back to the primary purpose, though, of this presentation, I wanted to really look at the science. I wanted to look at the science related to electronic medication management systems, which we all know are deployed throughout our country and now even worldwide. I found some science that I can share with you related to that. However, it tells us exactly what we all anticipated, that by having medication dispensing cabinets where you have to scan your fingerprint or put in a code and then pull out the medication and scan the armband of a patient and then scan the medication so you know that it's been delivered, creates improvement in patient safety. So, but does it really save money, and does it hurt or help from a clinical perspective? Well, this study that I just shared with you on the front cover went into great detail about medication management. And they analyzed an electronic system to a pen and paper system related to wrong patient, wrong drug, wrong dose, all the things that you see here on the screen. And this was from 2012 when it started, so almost a decade ago. So you can see the conclusions here on the screen. What they're showing is that the examination of medication error reports suggests there are differences in the type of medication errors. Well, what that is saying in a very polite way is that the pen and paper wasn't as detailed, nor did it have as much improvement suggestions or trends that you could say, this is what is the root cause of an analysis, which is always important to have when we're looking at patient care. But the outcome of that particular study also supported the understanding of the prevalence, trends, types of reports between the two delivery systems. In other words, it needs to be studied more. So I went on and I found another study that was published a year later. But what was interesting about this one was a worldwide study related to the impact of electronic medical records on time management. And of course, when you make a change, which is we're going to kind of talk about, sometimes you end up with a resistance to that change. And the resistance can be, it's going to take me more time, it's going to impede my patient care. Well, that's not what this particular study showed. The conclusion was that electronic medication management systems did not result in redistribution of time away from direct patient care. So that's good. So we could talk about many other studies, and that's what I intended to do pre-COVID, with lots of bars and graphs and thinking about ways that we, as a respiratory care profession, could help impact that and may even improve on it. Um, but by 2017, what I found was that the adoption of electronic medical management system was so commonplace that there was even standardized workflows that have been published related to how you do this. And here at Vanderbilt, we have put in new cabinets. We've had new soft upgrade, 2 in a year. So it proves that it works. So that is until something happens. But let's talk about the rest of the story. And I cannot separate the story from Vanderbilt or myself from Vanderbilt. And I wanted to just give some background to who we are historically. Just like I did with the law, I think it's very important to, where have you come from? What is the foundation? Well, today, Vanderbilt is 12 million square feet of building space, 864 adult beds, 267 peds beds, 24,000 employees, and we're the only level 1 trauma center from the north to the south, east, and west by a 150-mile radius. So we stay extremely busy. In fact, if you look at some of the national standards, you know how I was talking about the departments and the agencies of the federal government this morning? Well, the Department of Justice identifies a mass casualty event as an event in which 4 or more individuals are shot, injured, wounded, or killed, excluding the perpetrator of the event at one time. Well, for Vanderbilt, that's a normal Tuesday. We have one of the busiest EDs, and we have one of the busiest trauma centers or trauma ICUs, as well as all of the other 8 ICUs we have now, one of which is being COVID, is what's kind of driving this conversation I'm having with you. So specifically though, to the respiratory care department, talk about with medication management, we have 106 total full-time equivalent positions. And that covers all of the areas that I'm talking to you about. But we have a culture and a history based upon service. If you guys can't hear this clip, please, somebody from the panelists, let me know. But take a look at who Vanderbilt really is or was before COVID.
Who are we? We're the early risers, the overachievers, the greeters and behind the sceners. We're the fixers, feeders, finders, and cleaners, the teachers, techies, and healers. We're the heartbeat of Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Over 20,000 heartbeats, actually. We keep this place running around the clock, every single day. It's in the quiet corners, the places you might miss. But look closely, because the wonders performed here are what make the wonders here possible. How do we do it? Well, we hold to certain values. Our credo: we believe in service, excellent service, to our patients, families, visitors, students, and to each other. We respect privacy and expect professionalism. We communicate effectively, take ownership, and most of all, we care. We care about this medical center. We care about the work we do, and we care about each other. Why? Because what we do matters. It matters to a lot of people. But world-renowned healthcare doesn't just begin here. It begins here, and here, and here. Our teamwork is what makes this place special. It's who we are, and together, we do amazing things.
So Vanderbilt holds a credo, and that credo starts from day one. The credo is ingrained into our employees, or at least we try to, where everything that we do provides excellence in healthcare, research, education, and we try to treat all of our employees the way that we want to be treated. I'm really proud, and I do get emotional about it because I've worked in a lot of different international organizations. I've worked in small family-owned businesses all the way up to Fortune 500, and I've never seen an organization that its leaders really live the credo by their actions and not just with their words. So what the story I'm going to share with you today is interesting because we thought we as a department could manage anything that was thrown at us. Remember, us having mass casualty events is an average Tuesday. Once again, our culture started long before I got here, but that's part of the story. So I've got just a few facts to share with you, and these are the faces of the people that I really respect. These are individuals that, together with their teammates, perform what I call miracles every day. And if you look at this total team that you're seeing here, we have a great historical foundation. The director of the respiratory care department, before Craig Rooks took over, who I introduced you to today, was here for about 30 years. And prior to that, Don Adair, one of the fathers of respiratory care in this part of the country, was here for 37 plus years. So that leadership that we held had some deep, deep roots and bonds. In fact, if you look at this particular slide, you can see of the 80 FTEs at a snapshot that I'm talking about had 1,216 years of service on an average of 14.5 years of level 1 trauma center experience. But more impressively than that, you can see on the slide here that of those 80 full-time equivalents, which makes up the 106 people I was talking about, 24 of them, about 26%, are adult critical care specialists. And a known fact, and I talked a little bit about the Tennessee board this morning. Well, the last board meeting, they did some calculations and reported there's roughly 3,800 registered respiratory therapists in the state of Tennessee. But according to the 2019 stats, we don't have the 2020 stats yet from the NBRC. In the state of Tennessee, there's only 45 adult respiratory care specialists. So ACCS by the NBRC. So of those 45, about 50% work at Vanderbilt. So we're really proud of that. So we thought, okay, this is great. But you also see on this particular slide a story I want to tell you about, and that's about the book Good to Great, whose Jim Collins is an author. And Jim, if you've never read any of his work or gone to his website, I really encourage you to do that. This book, Good to Great, was published in 2000, and it's a business book, a business analysis book about why some companies just stay good and some companies become great. And they had all a common theme. They were level 5 leadership. They were consistent with their mission and vision. They weren't jack of all trades. They focused in with a hedgehog type concept. And also what they found is they made lists of what not to do. And here at Vanderbilt, we have done that. You know, our practitioners don't do art lines. We don't do innovations. Those are technical skills that we can train almost any practitioner to do. However, the critical skill thinking that creates somebody to be a great clinician is just that. It takes time to be analytical. And if you're always just doing innovations or doing art lines and managing art lines, how can you really take the best care of your patients? So once again, we were really proud of what we were able to do. But on a personal level, I bought this book in an airport in 2000 just because I needed something to read. And I was working for an international company at the time, and I was flying every week. Fly business class, was always gone. I worked really hard, but I just was spinning. I was just really, really spinning. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And in Good to Great, Mr. Collins explains a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG type thing. So, and once again, those are goals that going from good to great, you can set. And so in that time, I was spending a lot of administrative law time with part of the business I was working for that was having Medicare claims denied. And I would go to these administrative law judge hearings and I would decide what we needed to do, write up everything that I think we needed to do as a company. And then my bosses would say, Roger, take it to the lawyers. And then the lawyers would say, yep, Roger, you're right. And then I would, not me personally, but I would get a bill for $800. It really, really bothered me. So I said, okay. At that time, I just had an associate's degree, and one that wasn't from a prestigious school. In fact, when I went back and looked at it, there was a 7-year period that I had from the time that I took my CRT to the time that I took my RRT. I was just too busy trying to make money and live. I didn't see the value of education. And so I thought about, you know, if these yahoos could become lawyers, I could become a lawyer. But how would I do that? So I set that as a big, hairy goal. And to this day, I go back to the teaching of Good to Great 20 years later. And it has taken me 20 years to go back and get an undergraduate bachelor's degree with a very high GPA, and to take the LSATs, and then to spend 5 years getting through law school. First year in a local law school, and then on to an accredited Emory Law School. But I did that based upon this book, and it changed us. And Vanderbilt has used this as well. So I think the thing that takes the test of time is, does it last? Or that stands the test of time, does it last? And Mr. Collins' research has done that. And one of the things he talks about, and what we all do in the practice of respiratory care, and I know we're going to talk about respect later on the panel, but we're very, very consistent. We're very quiet, and we're under the radar, and we get the jobs done. And if we don't have the tools, we don't have the supplies, we'll make it. We'll make it work. But with all of that, the final thing I want to talk before we move on about Jim Collins, and I want to show you a clip where he talks about consistency, is the flywheel concepts. And when you are working with a machine that uses a flywheel, the first turn of the flywheel doesn't really make much motion, but you keep pushing and you keep pushing and you keep pushing, and all of a sudden that flywheel becomes great. So I want to tell my personal story, and I think this will help us get started with that. So hope you can enjoy Mr. Collins here for just a moment.
Remember we wrote in Good to Great that big things happen by pushing on a giant heavy flywheel. You start pushing in an intelligent and consistent direction, and after a lot of work you get one giant slow creaky turn. But you don't stop. You keep pushing, and you eventually get 2 turns, and 4 and 16 and 32 and 64 and 100 and 1,000, pushing cumulative consistent momentum, and at one point it's 100,000 and a million turns in that flywheel. Big things happen because you do a bunch of little things supremely well that compound over time. Now this is what we learned. We see tremendous consistency in any truly great enterprise. The signature of mediocrity is not an unwillingness to change. Although, and we'll get to this, if you don't change, you become irrelevant. But the true signature of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency.
So with that, brings us back to our credo. And why do I think Vanderbilt has been so successful? I think it's because of that consistency standpoint, that we provide the excellence in healthcare regardless of what happens. In fact, a few years ago, before I joined Vanderbilt, there was a reduction in force. And even through that, the department thrived. We weren't able to do everything that we wanted to do, and the enterprise had to not give raises for a few years because of the changing of the healthcare market. And once again, it goes back to understanding the law. We don't have time to talk about that, but it's part of my personal story. So I thought that I would think, okay, we're really good at medication management. And I think we were, but then something happened. And that something happened was COVID-19. So I want to tell you my personal story about COVID-19 again. So in my role, I'm responsible to make sure that our staff is doing as the best that they can and they have everything that they need. And when COVID-19 hit, I couldn't understand why we had so much going on that seemed to be chaotic, and we were losing our consistency. And I wanted to know why. Why was it challenging us to the point that it was causing this inconsistency? We were losing our mojo. We were losing our game. And in fact, excuse me, in fact, the first Friday night of March of 2019, I was sitting at my kitchen table watching cable news, and all of a sudden I started crying. No, I was sobbing. The thought that I could lose half of my family, oh, it was hard. So, what did I do? I said, okay, I'm going to fight this. And of course, it didn't help that Friday night that I was sitting there thinking that half of my Vanderbilt family was going to get sick and die. Because keep in mind, on average, our staff has 14.5 years of level 1 service. So what that means is about a half of our team are between 55 and 65 years old. And how are they going to care for patients if they were sick? And then this is where the funny part comes in, because Craig Rooks had come into my office late that Friday afternoon and said, I've just secured an extra 100 ventilators. We need to plan for a staffing of needs for 300 ventilators. Now we're busy and we run between 60 and 70 ventilators a day, but 300 ventilators, how was I going to do that? So I didn't sleep much that Friday night. So what I did is I went right back to my fight or flight mode, and I was going to fight this. And I worked the entire weekend on an Excel workbook, not just a spreadsheet, a workbook that was a really state-of-the-art work of art. It was gorgeous. It had us ramping up from our average par level of 18 or 19 practitioners per shift, all the way up to we could manage 300 ventilators in a shift. I was ready to meet with Mr. Rooks on Monday. I was going to show him the state of art. The problem with that is I wasn't living in reality, because you know how we were going to manage 300 ventilators? I was going to make everybody work 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, no time off. We were going to beat this. But then it realized to me, this wasn't going to work. And what happened next was really scary. So that Monday I came in, and all of a sudden we had 2 resignations from 2 key employees that had long-term combined about 50 years of experience and institutional knowledge in the practice of respiratory care. And what this shows you on this slide is that from February to March, we lost on average that experience just from 2 people, and we lost that 50 years. We went from an average of 14.5 years of experience to an average of 11.7 years of experience. Boy, this was bad. We were losing our consistency, how we were going to do that, and what was the ripple effect of that. And we were afraid, and we knew right then we had to do something about that. And then when you went and looked, okay, well, how was this impacting our medication scanning rate at that time? Well, take a look at this particular slide. This is pre-COVID. So what we have here is really, really good. You know, all this barcoding, scanning, medication dispensing management system, they give us these kind of results. So we have a goal of 95%. And you can see on the practitioners, and I could explain this and spend the time, but that's not my real story. We're going to get to my real story in a second. But we were meeting or exceeding that 95% threshold. And then COVID hit, and looked what happened. We automatically had 35 staff members that, this is a typo, I'm sorry, that fell below 95%, or 38% of our staff was missing the threshold. They were not pulling from the medication cabinets right. They were not scanning right. And we could not understand what was happening. And it was fear. It was not patient load, it was fear. I've got to do this thing differently when they were dealing with these COVID patients. And what we found out really from our story was of all the viruses that attack the vernal nerve tissue of a nation at war, rumor is the most malignant. Now, I'm not comparing COVID to World War II, but what I am telling you is that we realized very quickly that the majority of our staff responsible for medication management was afraid, and they were being inconsistent, and they were afraid because of the rumors that they were hearing. They were hearing that Roger was in tears because we were going to have 300 ventilators running, and that Craig was stockpiling equipment, and that the overtime was going to be mandated, and all the different things. And they were just rumors, but staff was talking to each other, and they were listening to the nightly news, and they were getting their misinformation from all different sources, and it just was not good. And so what we realized very quickly, that the entire team was seeing life through their own unique filters. We realized that my reality, sitting at my kitchen table sobbing, was not the reality of some of our new graduates, or was not the reality of somebody that was commuting in, or somebody fill in the blank. And we knew that we needed to come back to what is the reality that we are facing. And you remember that great work of art, Excel workbook, that the staffing model I spent all weekend building? When when I presented it to Craig, he said, Roger, he said, is this reality? And then I think he did ask me if I had been crying because my eyes were puffy. And he reminded us that we did not have, or I did not have 300 ventilator patients to manage today. So what was our reality? And then he reminded me of something that had happened earlier, previous to COVID-19, in November of 2019. And we were very fortunate here at Vanderbilt to meet with Cy Wakeman, who is an author, and she's a counselor, and she has a background in managing healthcare organizations as well. But she teaches reality-based leadership to ditch the drama and turn excuses into results. And if anybody had drama, it was me sobbing at my kitchen table just listening to cable news. It was drama that I did not need. And so Craig then reminded me, hey, Roger, you went and you met Cy Wakeman. You went to an all-day conference talking about reality-based leadership, that you've got to live in where you are. And worrying about managing 300 ventilators when they're not here yet. Maybe we'll get there, but it's not healthy. And so he reminded me too, that, hey, that hat you got, it says your ego is not your amigo. Why don't you go put it on? And so I did that. And Miss Wakeman is a great author. And if you can't buy the book, borrow the book, if you can go to her website and listen to some of her podcasts, they're really great, because she grounds you in that the problem that you're dealing with right now could be you. The problem you're dealing with could be made up in your head. And so after that Monday, Craig cutting me down about my beautiful work of art staffing model, I went and I found the 2004 book that Cy had written called Reality-Based Leadership. So these two books you see on the left side of the screen are a precursor, I guess, whatever that means, to the No Ego book. But then, because of our staffing needs, because we had gone from 14.5 years on average experience to 9.5 years overnight, we needed to understand why. And so that point was that we decided we needed to reckon with our own realities. We needed to decide what was the best course of action. So we decided we would have an open and honest discussion about our realities with every team member. We would meet with every person in the respiratory care department. Now, how do you meet very quickly in a time frame with 100 different people? Well, once again, I went back to my analytical mindset, and I just scheduled 30-minute meetings for 12, 14 hours a day between Craig and myself. We were going to meet with every person in the department. But how would we do that without escalating that fear? How we were going to do that without creating more rumors? Well, fortunately, it was mid-year evaluation time. And so that was an excuse as well as to meet a need of how we got together. So what we decided to do is to build some tools. And what you see on your screen here is the foundation of something that I had seen on a LinkedIn account. You remember the same weekend that I was sobbing? I went on to LinkedIn, and one of the senior European leaders of Hollister, you know, the company that makes tube holders, had put together a diagram. And in the center of the diagram, where you now see the human factor there, it said, who do I want to be during COVID? And it had a fear circle, it had a learning circle, and it had a growth circle. And it was exactly what I needed to hear over that weekend. And when we examine our fear circle, our human fear circles, the first thing that when we're living in those human fear circles, and this is what Cy Wakeman and Jim Collins and everybody that have touched my life teaches, is that the first thing that you do is you think about how change affects you, and you don't examine the facts. It's somebody else's fault. And then you start spreading negative emotions to anybody who would listen. And I can guarantee you that weekend I was sobbing. I'm sure I talked to extended family, and I just, it's going to be bad. It's just going to be bad. And also what happens in the fear and negative zone, that you tend to complain frequently, as the slide now shows you, and that you will be more tending to spread false and toxic or unverified information. Now, keep in mind, I was watching cable news. I was flipping from Fox to CNN to MSNBC to anybody that I could listen to. I was trying to absorb all the news that I could, which wasn't the right thing to do. I needed to get back to reality. What really is the fact that I'm living in today? It wasn't reality. My fear wasn't reality. So the final thing about that fear zone, it's always about you. And when it's about you, you give disrespectful actions to others. So with the realization that Roger was living in a fear zone, how were we going to get Roger out of the fear zone and spread goodwill to all of our teammates? So we'll come back to that in a moment. And I talked about the fear zone, and the learning zone, and the growth zone. I'll share that with you. But first, let's go back to the plan of what we did based upon fear and based upon our dropping medications management scanning rates, which does affect patient safety, and it does affect cost. In fact, I failed to tell you in the start of this conversation, the research shows that medication errors at the time that these medication cabinets we're talking about were putting in cost $21 billion in additional costs of healthcare. Medication errors 10 years ago cost our country $21 billion of healthcare cost. So back to reality. So what did we do? So we put together a leadership review question set. And what these questions are, we'll go in more detail to them. But the first question was, what specific actions should your leaderships take to improve the clinical care provided by Vanderbilt? Keep in mind, nowhere on this form did it say COVID. Nowhere on this form did it say medication management. And we didn't want to chastise anybody for not following the rules of scanning medication and dispensing them from a medication cabinet. Then we said, what other leadership improvement suggestions can we provide? And then the third question is a scale that we didn't ask anybody to answer, and I'll come back to that. But prior to our meetings, we customized this particular form on an 8.5 very hard cardstock, and we customized it for every individual. And so when I met with the individuals, or Craig met with the individuals, we put this card in their hand. It was something of value. It looked expensive. We don't print in color at Vanderbilt. It costs money. So once again, we did that. And then we also went back to that fear and negative zone diagram I shared with you, and we created one that had the growth zone on it as well as the learning zone. So let's talk about that in a moment. When you see this slide built out, you will know that when we met with everybody, we were able to put this in their hands, and it was something of value. So to get out of the fear and negative zone, you've got to embrace the learning zone. Backtrack 20 years ago, that's what I did. I said, I'm going to learn, I'm going to take advantage, I make enough money, screw my kids' college funds, screw my retirement, I'm going to go back to school. And fortunately, that's when electronic learning and what we're having to do today became reality. I could take courses online. I could go back to school in accredited university. So I embraced that learning zone. So once again, to go out of the fear zone, you've got to start accepting what is your reality with positive attitudes and actions. And you've got to stop complaining, and you've got to stop consuming hurtful things, from bad foods to bad news sources, disinformation, and develop new skills and start examining the facts and the figures. I may have bored you to death this morning with the facts and the figures about the law, about how the law is developed in our country. And I could have gone on. But that's what holds value, is facts. It's not somebody's social media. It's not conspiracy theories. It's what are you living in now? What are the facts that you're living in now? And then, of course, you have to identify your emotions and think before you speak or gossip. Sometimes that's really, really hard to do. Then the bottom half of the learning zone is that when you need help, you reach out to mentors and experts. And this morning, when I started this the presentation, I wanted to reach out to Colleen and say, stop, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing here with this Zoom thing. It took me off the game. I went right back this morning into that fear zone that I was going to be fill in the blank. It didn't matter, but you need the help of your friends. You need to always not be the smartest person in the room. And if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to go find a different room. But I encourage all of you, whether or not you're my age or you're a new grad in respiratory care, start developing a mentorship and expert circle of friends. Somebody that's different from you, maybe somebody that's not a Democrat or Republican. Find one of those people that you're not and go find and talk to them. And then evaluate information and get the facts again. I keep coming back to that. And then recognize that we are all trying to do the best that we can do in a bad situation. So that's also very hard to do, because when we get stressed, things are hitting the fan and we can't get all of our work done, and my assignment is way too busy. I'm never going to get to all these patients. And he gave me a bad assignment, or she did this on the last shift, whatever it is. Just remember that probably everybody 99% of the time is trying to do the best they can in a difficult situation, and give them a little grace. Just give them a little grace. And then I really find that the learning zone is impactful when you do more than you're asked. I remember in times that have given me great joy was when I was able to help somebody on Saturday and then say, hey, I'm available on Sunday. Do you need me to cover for you on Sunday too? There's somebody that was going through a really bad time. That's the learning zone. If you do these things in the learning zone, then it's going to take you to that green zone, of what I like to call the adopt the growth and success zone. With the end result of the success zone is, how can I help? That you want to think of others and your team members first. And then you ask, are the actions I'm doing making a difference? And then think about, how can my new skills and talents available help? And how can I volunteer to help? And I talked to you this morning about the frustration I had with the legal community when I would go to them and I would ask them a point question, and they would say, well, it depends. Give me some more facts. And that's what we have to do. But if you have a skill set you're not sharing, I really hope that you will do that. So thirdly, there in the top of the growth zone, we need to build empathy. We need to strive for communication. We need to understand where everyone else is in life and realize it's not about you. It's just not about you. Reality-based leadership. And leadership is not a title. It's not a level of education. It's actions and the way that you treat others. So if you can do the top half of this growth and success zone, you'll be able to forgive and forget by extending grace and live in the present, and the past is gone. I could have really beat myself up for this morning, getting so nervous and so upset, not having Colleen right at my side, but it's gone. So I said, okay, I'm going to present again at 1:45, put the happy face on, let's go. I've got some knowledge I want to share, regardless if you want to receive it or not. I think it holds value, but try to do that in your own life. And then secondly, embrace change with continual learning and understand that change is going to happen and you need to adapt to it. And then once again, you're seeing some common themes here. If you go on down the scale there, that you practice gratitude, tolerance, and build cultural relationships with positivity. In fact, I think that I have a stat here related to something. I think it was from the Harvard School of Business, and they did a study, and they found that if you focus on gratitude, you become happy, regardless of whatever your situation is. And I promised you I was going to do PowerPoint by death today, that I was just going to tell you my story. So I'm going to let that stat slide. But I can only speak to you that when I started to say thank you for all the things that I had in life, it's when I became happy for the first time in a very long time. So then final thing that the science tells us and what we've done here at Vanderbilt is that we've established an annual learning plan for all of our people. And I would encourage you to do that, even if you want to decide how to garden or do basket weaving or do something outside of the field of the respiratory science. Go do it. Go earn and learn if you can. So if you do that as a respiratory practitioner, then you can come back and look at this scale that we developed. So I want you to focus on question 3 there for just a second. Question 3. Start at number 2. Respiratory care is my job, and I do what I must do to keep my job. No more, no less. Now get out of my face, or get off my lawn. My case, it's get off my lawn. I'm in that age bracket. I can sit on the porch at Halloween and I'd be grumpy old man. Just get off my lawn. However, what we want to strive for is higher on this particular scale. We want to look at a 3 or 4, which is respiratory is how I introduce myself. It pays the bills, but I want to do something else for more money. If that's where you are on this scale, go do it. Don't stay in respiratory care. Get out of the respiratory care. If that's how you feel, get out of respiratory care. But if you're in that 5 or 6 and being a respiratory therapist is your career and it adds value to your life, that's great. Why don't you think about advancing your education or advancing your knowledge by taking an NBRC exam? It's just a test. So what if you fail it? You can take it again, but try to earn some advanced credentials. I took the ACCS 5 years ago, and I fortunately have enough CRCEs that it's going to be renewed. But you know what? The only exam that the NBRC offers that I don't have is a sleep disorder. I need to take that. That's my goal for 2020. I need some more letters behind my name. And that's a joke. I don't need any more letters behind my name. But then looking at the scale again, if you are 7 or 8, that's great. That you're engaged respiratory practitioner with advanced credentials and you're pursuing a higher level of degree, so be it. That is great. Now, I may make some people angry by saying this, but we are now getting the respect nationwide because of a pandemic, maybe. But why haven't we gotten it before? Is because we have not mandated that all the people that enter this profession or that are in this profession will have a BS degree or should have a BS degree. The government that I talked about this morning does not recognize any field as a profession unless the entry level is a bachelor's degree. So I understand that if you're in a place and you're going to retire in 5 or 6 years, and if you go and you spend $40,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 on an education, the return on that investment is probably not worth it to you. But if you're 25 years old, go get a bachelor's degree. Go get it. And then maybe you can be a 10 there, which is like Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. And I hope you understand what that is. And I'm going to just do a little quick time check here. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, so I want to keep going. So what we did in our story is that when we met with every practitioner, we had the beautiful fear zone, growth zone, and learning zone card, plus we had this particular card that was customized to them. We didn't have anybody that gave us any pushback on this. We didn't make anybody answer the scale question that you see in front of you there. And that's because we wanted this to be self-reflection. We wanted people to be in their own place and come to their own conclusions and not feel pressure. But what we did want them to do is get out of that fear zone and to work. And so what we did after we met with everybody and we talked to them, and I made notes about what was going on in the department, and we talked about our scanning rates, and we talked about things. We uncovered that when we drilled down on the negative comments, they were really rooted between shifts within the hospital and other departments. Excuse me. It really wasn't related to our consistency or our factors of other things that we thought it was. It really wasn't related to things that were in that fear zone. It really was in that whole rumor zone. So anyway, we also uncovered an unexpected finding is that the majority of the concerns that our staff had around COVID-19 and medication management and dispensing was rooted in how people prefer to communicate. Some people were not getting the messages that were coming on our daily huddle calls or daily emails or a website that Vanderbilt produced. Everybody liked different forms of communication. So during the pandemic, and what we did is that we just started doing communications in all three forms: in person, by phone calls, by emails, by text. And then we saw an improvement. And then the last thing is kind of a personal department type of thing. Craig started doing what he calls a weekender, and it has the personal stories. And like I've shared my soul with you today to cry on this Zoom hour that's being recorded. But anyway, that made a connection with our team. We want to know more about your family, want to know more about the challenges you're going through, and that's helped. And so what we ended up doing is that we expanded upon the reality-based leadership, and we expanded on looking at the things that we did right. We made some list of what we could stop doing during COVID-19, and we really focused on building the relationships with our team. We then went back to that historical culture that Vanderbilt had, that credo thing, and I think it was fractured a little bit. We were scared. We were all in our fear zone. And then what we have found to do that we need to execute. So if we say we're going to do something, we do it. We listen and we have those conversations that need to be had. Now, I'm really excited to share with you. This is the latest dashboard that we look at our medication management by practitioner. And so only 21 staff members this month, or last month actually, about a 6-week period, fell below the 95% threshold. Now keep in mind, some of that threshold is caused because we are a level 1 trauma center and the patient doesn't have an armband on yet, so you can't really scan the patient. But what this shows is that we had a 40% improvement just by getting people out of their fear zone and learning ways to work around that. Another exciting thing that I want to share with you before we have to close up I think I'm going to get my 5-minute warning here, is just to take a look at the remarkable miracles that respiratory practitioners have done here at Vanderbilt. But I could probably put this on any hospital in our nation right now. What this graph shows that during the month of July, August, and September, we took on 10,536 more ventilator hours of patient management than we had year over year. And those 10,000 hours of ventilator management were all COVID-19 ventilator dependent patients. And you know what? We haven't lost anybody else. Nobody has quit without notice. Nobody else has said, I'm not doing this anymore. And we've not had to hire PRNs. We've not had to get a staffing pool. What is it called? We bring in travelers. We haven't had to do that. And so what we have learned from this, if we can get out of our fear zone, we can make it work. We understand now that between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. And in that space, it's our power to choose our response. You can cry at your kitchen table, or you can go work all weekend on a work product that means absolutely nothing and it's not based in reality. Nobody can work 7 days a week at 12-hour shifts in a COVID unit, week after week after week. But it's in our response that lies our growth and our freedom. Get your reality. So this is a quote that was taken from Dr. Meg Rush, who's the president of the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, and she is an inspirational speaker. So I can't take credit for that, but we've stolen it. And then we've realized too that what lies beneath us and what lies before us are really small compared to what lies within us. What we have been able to do as a team is something that's never been done before. And I think that's because of the way that we as a team came together, got out of that fear zone and went into the learning zone and started listening to each other in ways that we've never done before. So I know this was 40 minutes, not on patient safety, of medication management, but really it is. Because when you get out of your fear zone and you go to your growth zone, you're going to be able to communicate better. You're going to be able to identify those problems that are relating to therapy delivery, medication management, fill in the blank. You're going to be able to do that. And of course, now that I'm part of the legal profession here, I have to be shameless here. Anybody that's out there that wants to work at Vanderbilt, please send us your resume. It's been my honor to spend more time with you today. And I am here anytime. If I can help anybody on this symposium with a question or concern, it would be my honor to talk to you privately, or hopefully in the future, and maybe next year we'll be back in Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg celebrating together. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Roger. We've got numerous positive comments about your presentation. And we also have a couple of questions. The first one is someone wanted to thank you for being vulnerable and relating to the fears we all have felt. One also said awesome presentation, but here's a question. What was your max daily ventilator total in the first wave of COVID and now currently as we see a spike statewide?
Great question. I think part of what we were able to do in the first wave, our max was between 10 and 15 ventilators a day, which doesn't sound like a lot. However, it was the churn of those and the reality that those patients needed what I call tinkering with all the time. It wasn't that you could just do a ventilator change and let them ride for a while. They were constantly changing and desatting very quickly. So on average, if we had 12 or 15 ventilators running on in our MI or our SIC unit, we would probably have 2 practitioners. For 12 COVID patients, we were having to put 4 practitioners on that floor. And it's not so much the ventilator patients, it's those patients who would come in such respiratory distress that we were running not just 12 ventilators, but we were running 15 and 16 and 20 BiPAPs and Optiflows or Vapotherms or the high insufflation nasal cannulas, which you understand takes lots of time. In fact, a patient on a V60 BiPAP can be more consuming to get them acclimated to that than just intubating them. So that's a very long answer. Today, we are back up to those same levels, unfortunately. Now, what we are finding that we're not intubating as quickly. We are finding that going right to the high flow and the V60 non-invasive ventilation is helping us very much with keeping those patients off the ventilator and intubating them. But the workload is extreme. And we're working really hard right now, excuse me, not to go back into the fear zone. So thank you. Other questions?
Yes, we have another one.
Okay.
And this is not me asking, but it kind of fits. As an older therapist, how do you give knowledge when a lot of the younger generation seems offended by this?
You know, whenever I have a situation that could be confrontational, the first thing that I do is take a deep breath and I say, help me understand your point of view. Help me understand where you're at. And that also breaks the ice and allows that individual to tell me something that I may not know. Because it's very easy in the work environment we're currently facing to be judgmental and to say, do it this way. You know, I've done this for 30 years. I know exactly what I'm doing and you're wasting your time. And it's interesting that some of our scanning trauma that we had, I'm calling it trauma because it is a key indicator of how well we're giving patient care. When that falls below 95%, was really related to some of our older practitioners going back to that old pen and paper type of mentality, not having to worry about doing some of that scanning. So I think the best way to approach a generational gap is to take it outside of really what's happening and say, can you help educate me on why you're doing that? So Colleen, I hope that helps.
Yes, Roger. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we had a few more questions, but we are out of time. But I just wanted to let you know that you have had 58 positive comments
Thank you
on your talk.
I appreciate it.
So thank you very much, Roger.
Yeah,
and we
if I
will be
could go
hearing
back
from you again next year.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope that I'll be able to share much more positive information on how we have managed COVID. One of the things, my goal is somebody at this organization knows Dolly Parton. She just gave $1 million in April to the research, which is great. So my goal is somehow to get connected with Dolly and I can share Dolly with all of you guys in Pigeon Forge next year. Deal? Is that deal?
I'll bet you do.
Okay.
Thanks,
All right.
Roger.
All right. Everyone have a great afternoon and I'll be back with you on the panel with Mr. Gant. Thanks so much.
Thank you.